This street scene in the European city of Prague is a nice example of where we have a curved perspective that we have to manage in our drawing. Most perspective videos seem to feature an abundance of straight lines, boxes all lined up at right angles to each other, but real life is not often so straight as that. So let's have a look at where we have a street that curves around towards us and the facade has a slight curve on it along with that roadway. So we're starting though with this green building at the left, and it doesn't particularly have a curve in it, or if it's a very slight curve. Now, eye level is in this case about at the level of all the heads that we have in our scene. If we average all those heads, that's probably where eye level is. That's where our notional straight line is on the horizontal across our drawing. Above that, the lines slope down, the perspective angles slope down towards the left. Below that, they slope up towards the left, although there aren't as many lines below that. The other thing we have to bear in mind is the foreshortening, that as these windows move further to the left and move further away, they become narrower in that process, and the gaps between them becomes narrower. And if we're drawing on a scale where we can actually see some detail inside those window recesses, what we see actually changes. It doesn't just become narrower, it changes as the windows move further away. So I start with this green building, pale green building, because its lines are straight, that makes it more straightforward. And we have a row of windows that we can line up, and then we have windows that line up underneath with an arched doorway in the center. So I'm thinking that's a fairly good way to get a good starting point where I can use it as a reference point. I can use it to measure height and alignment and proportion when I move on to do the orange building, which has the challenges of the curvature in the facade. So just doing some of the detail here. We always need to draw objects in front of other objects before we draw the behind objects, or else we end up with lines in front of other lines. This way we can even stop lines that go behind objects just a fraction before they hit the line, which gives us a little more visual separation between the different objects. So I'm thinking I'll add this dormer section on top while I'm doing this and finish the green building. So I align it off the architectural elements below, in this case the windows. And again, checking the perspective angles of that dormer window. I also checked where the top point, the apex of the triangle, positioned with the architectural elements below. So this is our building that's pretty much a fairly standard perspective view of a building moving away from us with straight lines. Now we have the more challenging curved facade, and with these lines I make them a bit stiff, these ones at the top, but I think managed to get that curve in, not quite as smoothly as in life, but managed to improve it throughout the drawing. So these first windows, I align them with what's on the left-hand side in the building to the left. These windows, the decorative horizontal bar under those windows. And what I'm doing is I'm basically doing each window as having a separate perspective angle that increases. And I'm using that to get a sense of how high this curve goes up. So I'm taking each of these windows at the top as having a straight line, but a straight line that angles higher and higher on the right-hand side as the windows move across the front of the building. Now there is a bit of shallow relief, decorative elements on the facade of this, most of which I actually forget to do, and then I have to put the camera back on at the end to add it. But I can now put this figure in here. I didn't put the two small figures to the left in previously because I didn't feel I had enough drawn to confidently position them in the right place, given that they were so small. And because this is basically flat ground, I knew I needed to have all the heads line up. So now I can add them. Made them a little blobby. That will have to do. And then I decided to extend that green building one more row of windows, although it looks like I thought I did that now, but I do extend that to the left just to make it look a little more finished in our scene. So now I have these windows, and notice even the horizontal bars across the windows have to follow this new perspective pattern that doesn't just fan upwards, but the individual lines increase in angle as they move closer to us. And I realize that my curve is a little bit sharp there. It should have started just a little bit more to the left, but never mind. I'll work at that later. I keep saying don't worry about mistakes too much when we make them. We can often do some things to seriously improve the impact. And I use some hatching later to do that. So this is the decorative relief mouldings I do see and put on. And so now it really is a case of firstly seeing these curves in our observation of the scene before we start. I say over and over again, careful observation is 90% of drawing. It's not so much technical skills with our line work, but it's knowing where to put the lines and being able to choose the right sort of lines. And that's a creative process rather than a technical one. And I increasingly now don't think of lines, but I think of marks, and lines simply become one of the marks we have at our disposal to create the effects that we need for the scene that we have. And now I'm hoping to just ease out the kink a little bit visually. And again, I'm going to align with what I've already drawn. Now, this technique of measuring the angle with my pen, this can be done in location sketching as well. We simply hold the pen up in front of our eyes at the angle of whatever building we're looking at or object we're looking at, and then just bring it straight down onto our paper. And it sounds really messy, but it's surprisingly accurate. So there's a bit of curve in there that I need to get in place. Now, the angles that we're doing now increase in angle as they move away from eye level. So these horizontal lines that are in this dormer window and at the base of the pediment there, every horizontal line that goes upwards tilts upwards slightly more than the one underneath it. So we create this fan shape, this wedge shape with every line we draw. We never draw parallel lines. That's the important thing to remember. If I find I'm drawing parallel lines, I've lost track of the perspective angles. So there I just add now a little bit more of that green building. That's predictable. Now, this is where I think it's helpful to actually look and see what we can see in windows, not just to black them all out. The walls of this building are very thick, and basically the left-hand pane of glass in each of the double windows is completely taken up with the thickness of the wall, and therefore it's not dark. It's the space on the right-hand pane that becomes dark. So if we're not observing carefully, we're missing the chance to create a more lively visual impact, and we end up with a far deadlier looking solid facade where all the windows look as though there's a blackout on. So again, my principle, I like to draw the things in front before I draw the things behind. So now it's time to put these figures in. At the very least, this lady here in a very warm looking dark coat. So figures aren't my strong point, but as is the case with everything, with every object we see, it's a case of observing carefully, of seeing the form first, getting a sense of the three dimensions, and then translating that form into shape, into a two-dimensional shape that we're going to put possibly an outline, approximately, as in this case, on the page. And I do the same with the gentleman slightly in front. I don't need to do the legs of the lady in the coat. And now I've got this window. And again, I don't want to bring up the line work hard against the pedestrians. I want to leave just a slight buffer, just a 1/4 millimetre will do. We have some light boxes there, and then we have some. Now notice that those two frames that I did under the boxes that have, I presume, announcements on them, or perhaps they're menus, that the closer one is larger. It's following the perspective pattern, and as the lines radiate outwards as they go from left to right, it means that even from one side of the doorway to the other, there's a change in size. But the proportions for objects that are the same should stay the same. Now, there's a bit of hatching to do, just to indicate the darkness of the inside the archway. I keep the hatching very light. I keep this a very linear looking drawing, and that's part of the reason why I don't darken the lady's coat. I was quite liking the fairly light touch in the lines and decided to let that be the focus of this drawing. So even my hatching is relatively restrained. And so I'm leaving out that third figure there, the man walking towards us. The artist is always in control and gets to choose what they think will work best with the scene. But I did want to put that gutter line in on the extreme right that's curving down towards the bottom of the page, because that gives a strong sense of the curvature of the street. And now I've put the camera back on, having thought I'd finished, and add the decorative plasterwork, the shallow reliefs that frame these windows at the top. And then after I've done those, I'm thinking, well, while I've got my pen, I'll add that, again, indication of the curve of the street that we can see on the lower left section. Here it comes now. Don't do it quite as well as I would have liked to with the angles, but hopefully massage it back into shape. And then I think that the road is just looking way too big and blank and empty in the middle now. And so I want to give some indication of the effect of these pavers. And this is again where we need to avoid the mistake of trying to draw the detail, because we just won't be able to do it, and we'll probably end up getting the scale wrong. So we're trying to draw the effect. I do have a video. If you go to my Drawing the Effects of Things playlist, there is a video on drawing the effects of cobblestones, and particularly not so much ones such as this, but ones that fan out in curved patterns can be a bit tricky. And just the way to think, which of course always comes before the way we draw, so as to create an effective line work to bring that across. Our curved facade is pretty much done. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you have a go drawing this yourself. I've put this reference photo on my channel community page, so you'll be able to get it from there. Look, it's firstly a beautiful scene. These are beautiful buildings, and we just move along window by window, space between window by space between window, and checking our angles as we go all the way along. Why don't you give this a go? But look, whatever you end up drawing and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.